idtalks LGBTQIA+, and our guest speaker is Dani Prisacariu from Gender Talk Romania. Dani is a coach, facilitator, and a community builder committed to holding space for relational learning that creates more freedom. Most of their work has been devoted to LGBTQIA+ activism in Romania and Europe-wide, for community organizations and for social justice. In the 5 past years, also, Dani coordinates Gender Talks. It's a community initiative for gender explorers and rebels that work to create more space and possibilities for us to exist and thrive outside our gender binary. So yes, I don't know even how to express how happy and privileged we are to have you here with us today. Dani, as a colleague, I'm even more happy to pass you now the floor, please.
Thank you, Anna. Hi, everybody. So good to be here with you all and see your faces and your names here. I'm very happy to have this conversation with you, and I think it's so needed that we talk about this topic. So I'm happy that we share this space, and I invite you all to, come with me on this journey. And please feel free to, at any time, ask questions in the chat, and we'll have space for conversation in the end as well. So very happy to start the conversation. Let me share my screen. Okay, so as you saw today, we are going to speak about LGBTQIA+, which is a topic that is complex in itself, but I decided to add here the and beyond, hoping that today's conversation will be an opener of roads and of conversations and of questions for us all. And that is why I invite you even from the beginning to really step into this mindset of not knowing, or knowing that there is much more than we can possibly know, perhaps, when we speak about gender, sexuality, and these topics that we are going to explore today. And that is okay. Sometimes I know that people feel that we talk about so many things when we talk about LGBTQIA+. How many letters do we keep on adding to the alphabet soup here? But in reality, that is okay. It's just a way in which this field grows, and a way in which this conversation develop and grow as we move in the world and we discover ourselves more and more. And we find different words to talk about it. So just a few words about myself. So I'm Dani. I use they, them pronouns, so gender neutral pronouns. I am non-binary person, a queer person from Bucharest, Romania. As Anna shared already, I have been involved in activism and community organizing probably since I was about 20 years old. And that's definitely shaped a lot of who I am today and the place from where I am speaking. After 10 years of doing this, I would say that still my mind is open and I do not have all the answers, and I hope I probably will never have them, because that's good, right? To just explore the world with open heart and mind, seeing whatever else emerges and comes up into the world. Very briefly about me, because today is not about me. I will invite you, as I move along the next slides, to also write in the chat if you would like your name or pronoun that you use, and where are you joining us from, and anything else that you feel may be relevant, so that we get a sense of who is here in the room with us today. Good. As you do that, I will tell you just briefly what I am planning for us today. My hope is that after today, things will be a bit clearer when it comes to LGBTQIA+. What do we mean with all these letters here? What do they actually talk about? and hopefully even make it very relevant for you, no matter what is your gender identity, your sexuality, and so on. I hope that you will have some space to reflect and find some clarity on the topics, and also to get some practical ideas that you can take with you when you go back to your organizations, to your communities, and but also just maybe in your personal life. As I already briefly mentioned, I'm not planning to offer you perfect recipes of inclusion because they do not exist. The world is so complex. We are so complex as humans, but definitely we can try, and we can try and make it better and more inclusive and more accessible for people. I will not be talking about them. You know, sometimes when people speak about a certain group, they put them somewhere in a corner and they say, oh, it's those people over there. More, I would like to talk about us, because gender and sexuality, they are things that we all have, and we all can relate to them in one way or another, even though we are not LGBTQIA. And as I said, hello ambiguity. We will not really have answers and truths, like general answers and truths, but hopefully some perspectives that you can take with you as we move on. Good. So maybe just to start with a maybe radical opinion, I don't know, but from my work and my experience, I would definitely say that gender, sexuality, and sex characteristics have always existed outside the binary. What do I mean by that? We will explore a bit later, but basically, my radical idea is that the way that we look at gender right now and sexuality and our bodies exists in a very binary structure. And this has not always been like this. And I would like to share with you some of the ways in which this existed before. But maybe previously, before sharing that, I would like to say that for me, this journey of understanding gender and sexuality and sex characteristics has not always been like this. When I was a young child, I would say that I definitely did not hear or know or talk about this, and I strived my best to be normal, quote unquote, as we define normal in my society here in Romania. I'll try to be a good kid, and I try to be as feminine as I can, express myself in the gender that I thought that I needed to be in. I also believed lived with the idea that sexuality is a taboo and we don't really talk about it. Heterosexuality is the only sexuality that is accepted, and I should strive to be in a heterosexual relationship. And also that our bodies, and my body, was shameful and not to talk about. Because that was just not encouraged. So I just went with the flow, and I went with what society told me to do, and I tried my best, really tried my best at this gender exam in the world, right? It was only later that I decided to explore my own identity with more intention and with more curiosity. And as I was doing that, I couldn't help wondering how would my childhood and my youth would have been if I had the space, the time, and the resources to explore myself and my identity in a way that is not stigmatized or shamed, right? Maybe if I would have had access to various resources, I would have known that a neighboring country, almost neighboring country to Romania here in Albania, there was a different perspective on gender. And in Albania, for example, for centuries, there was this tradition where women born in families without boys, like girls born in families without boys, would take on the role of a boy in the family. And that was totally acceptable and normal in Albania. Maybe I would have found out that in other societies throughout time, and other cultures, to be more precise, for example, in the Native American culture, there were about 5 genders, and people would look at gender in this expansive way and not just 2 of them. Two-spirited people have been part of the Native American and are part of the Native American culture for centuries, and that is really amazing. They are seen as a through a spiritual lens, if you would like, they are seen as people who have the gift of having inside of them both male and female spirit, right? Maybe I would have found out that in Samoa Island, there are Fa'afafine and Fa'atama, who are different types of looking at gender that we couldn't even fit in, really, if I were to think now in the LGBTQIA plus terminology, because it's a very cultural, specifically cultural perspective that certain cultures, certain places, have on gender. And so these are just 3 examples, and you will have in the resources in the last slide that you will receive later on many other ways in which gender has been seen and is seen differently in different parts of the world. However, maybe you're wondering what happened since this exists. How did we come to this place where we only see gender, sexuality in this perspective of the binary? History happened, of course. Colonialization happened, and certain cultures were shaped by other cultures who came and imposed their perspectives on gender and sexuality. And this was the case definitely with the Native Americans, for example. And that is a pity, right? We can wonder what would have happened if these perspectives would have been left to grow, to flourish, and to be part of today's life more fully, right, throughout history. I already briefly mentioned about this binary, and I would like to make sure that everything is clear when it comes to this before I continue. So as I mentioned, the binary system in which we many times, most of the times I would dare to say, have when it comes to gender and sexuality, and not only, if you think about it, we have a binary thinking many times when it comes to good and bad, beautiful, ugly, and so on. We like to divide things into, and that is good and that is bad. It's the same when it comes to LGBTQIA plus, gender, sexuality, and sex characteristics. We grow up in a world that neatly divides us as humans into 2 categories. On one side, we have male, so you were born male, you identify as a man, you are masculine, you express yourself in a masculine way, and you're attracted to women, or you are a female, a woman, feminine, and attracted to men. These 2 categories, they are built in a way that tells us that these people, they are on the opposite spectrum of each other. Women and men are totally different from each other. They have different desires, different types of thinking, of acting, different things that they like to do, and so on. And on this basis, we build everything in society, roles that we may end up taking, jobs that we take, emotions that we are able to express or not, the types of love that we can access or not, right? However, if you just take a moment to sit with this information and think a bit about your life, your perspective on this, think about the people in your life and think about yourself and see, is this the exact and full truth that you live in? From my experience, looking around the people I am in community with, or my friends, or people that I work with, I can see a really big diversity, for example, when it comes to women that I know, or men that I know, they are very different one from another, which makes me wonder if this binary system, what is it with it in reality, and why is it that it is still a reality that we push, that we impose in many ways. The reality that I would like to propose to you today that we discussed, it looks a bit more like this. This is a really lovely resource that these people from Trans Student Educational Resource Center developed. And they propose that we look at LGBTQIA and at gender, sexuality, and sex characteristics through making friends with this unicorn here, which can be any of you, actually, any of us, to be honest. As I will go and introduce you this model, I would like that if you are able to grab a pen and a paper, or a phone and your fingers to type on the phone, however you would like. And as I will introduce these elements one by one, I will invite you to take a moment to reflect on yourself and on your own reality and experience. Because as I said, many times when we speak about LGBTQIA+, and I've seen that with many people I talked about, they put LGBTQI people in a corner, in a box, in a room. It's sexuality and gender, it's about them. In reality, it's about everybody. So I invite you to try this out and see if you can explore your own identity as I move along. Okay, good. So let's start with the beginning. Hopefully, yeah, okay. I'm sure that in movies and in life and wherever else, the most famous line when somebody has a baby, if you know, when somebody says, oh, I just had a baby, what do you first ask them, or are they asked first? Is it a boy or a girl? What is it? So that's the first question that we are asked directly or indirectly, when we come into this world. And this is the start of our conversation, our bodies and our biology. So when we speak about sex characteristics, we speak about that letter I in the LGBTQIA+. And it's really important that we start from here, because our bodies are gendered from birth, but they're also very specific biologies that we cannot deny, right? For many, many centuries, probably, we have looked at sex in a very binary way, like female and male. And that is the only two possibilities that exist. And the doctor says, it's a little girl or it's a little boy. In reality, sex is not binary either. And I know that may sound shocking, because we have not learned about this in biology, or at least I have not. Maybe you come from different countries and you may have learned about it. In reality, intersex children are not really talked about in biology, or when we speak about sex characteristics. I'm sure now you know about male and female and what does that mean, but intersex, when we speak about intersex people, we speak about people that cannot neatly be categorized in what we call male and female when it comes to biology and sex characteristics. I'm sure you know that sex characteristics are comprised of very many different elements. They are comprised of hormones and gonads and secondary sex characteristics and so on. So what makes our biology so unique is a combination of all these things, and that cannot be very, very strictly categorized in just two categories. All right. So this is the body, this is the physical, touchable, right, part of LGBTQIA+. After we are born and we are put into this category of sex, we grow up and we move on in our lives, and I wouldn't say that there is a moment in time that is specific to us figuring out our gender identity, but for some people that can happen when they are 3 years old, for others a bit later in life. Yeah, as I said, no definite answers, just some ideas. So as I said, as we grow up, we start to develop a sense of ourselves, which includes also our gender identity. So we start asking ourselves, and we start asking of others to refer to us in certain ways. So when we speak about gender identity, is our innate sense of self. Who are we actually? When I ask you, what is your gender? I am sure that for some of you, maybe for many of you, that is an easy answer to give. For others, it may be, actually, I never thought about this, or I do not know. Here in our model, they propose that we look at this on 3 separate lines, yeah, and you can put a little dot on each of these lines. Do you feel that you are more female, woman, girl? You can put a dot here, or on the contrary, if you're a man, you can put a dot here, or if you're another gender, you can put a dot here on the spectrum. Because gender identity is a spectrum. It's not something that it's either or. It's more like, if you can imagine, a spectrum that doesn't have necessarily a beginning or an end. It's just an open-ended space where we, each of us, can define ourselves and our identity. For some people, when they say they are, let's say, a woman, for many, I am a woman because I have a biology that is that of a woman's. And that's totally fair. Other people, I am a woman because I enjoy my femininity and I'm a very feminine person. That is also absolutely great. So I have asked many people how do they define themselves, and they gave me very, very many different answers when it comes to what actually makes them say that they are a woman or a man or a non-binary person. When we talk about gender identity, we have some specific terms that I would like to introduce to you. Besides this, like female, male, and so on, we have transgender. And when we speak about trans people, we speak about people who identify with a different gender than the one that they were assigned at birth. Yeah, you remember the previous conversation around sex characteristics? If when we are born, we are assigned the sex. So the doctor says it's a girl, for example, that also comes with a gender, with the luggage of a gender attached to it. Yes, so trans people are those that do not identify with that gender assigned at birth. Here we speak about trans women, which are women that were assigned male at birth, but identify as a woman. Yeah, and trans men are people that were assigned female at birth and identify as a man. We also talk here about cisgender, and cisgender is the opposite of transgender, which means that you identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth. Yeah, non-binary, which is anybody that feels that their gender does not fit neatly into these 2 categories of man and woman, but something else. Yeah, here we have many terminology that you maybe have heard about. Agender, genderqueer, bigender, very many different ways in which people use to define their gender. But don't worry. It's as easy as asking people, what does that mean for you? When you meet somebody that is non-binary or trans, you do not need to know all the lexicon and dictionary of LGBTQIA+ in order to understand them and chat with them. They can share more about that if they are willing to. Also, when we talk about gender identity, we speak about transition. And this is the process where a person starts living as their true gender. And that can mean a medical transition, that can mean a legal transition of changing your name or your gender marker. And of course, a social transition, telling your friends, telling the people around you that you for example, now use a different name, or you identify as non-binary, and so on. All right. Very important when we speak about gender identity are pronouns. I introduced my pronouns in the beginning as being they, them. And I also asked you to introduce your own pronouns. Basically, pronouns very simply are the words that we use when we speak about somebody instead of using their name. Maybe it seems that pronouns are not such a big deal. Oh, just a little word over there. But in reality, using the right pronouns for people shows them that you acknowledge their identity, you acknowledge their reality, and you want to be true to their reality, right? Oh, you identify as a woman, great. So, and you would like to use she, amazing. So I will use that. Many times people find it difficult to use gender neutral pronouns, but it's a practice, I promise. And it's something that comes easier with time once you start using them with your friends or with the non-binary people in your life. All right, so we talked about our bodies and we talked about our identity, so how we feel inside. Next is gender expression. And gender expression is different from gender identity. I know for many it may be the same. So what does that mean? It means that you identify as a woman, for example, and you express yourself in a feminine way. This is what is, let's say, expected maybe from in many societies. But for many people, that's not the case. I'm sure many of you know women that are masculine and know men that are feminine. And in the same way, with non-binary people who can also be feminine or masculine. So bottom line is, how do we express ourselves to the outer world? How do we show who we are in the to the people around us? Many times people assume that if I see somebody that is feminine, it means that that person is a woman and that that person uses she pronouns, for example. And that is not necessarily always the case. There are many people who are afraid or ashamed or not able to express their gender identity to the outer world due to fear of discrimination, fear of violence even. So just remember this. So we talked about the T and the I in the LGBTQIA+. Now I'd like to move us to sexual orientation, which appears a bit later on in life, right? I'm sure that you remember maybe first time you were like, oh, I would like to have a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. I'm not sure how young people, very, very, very young people sometimes say when they are in kindergarten, oh, I would like to do that. When we speak about this, it's important that we separate it a little bit. So first we have sexual orientation. So it's literally physical attraction to whomever. Yes. We have heterosexual people, gay people, bisexual, queer, pansexual, asexual. A very big diversity when it comes to this. And more I added there just because there are many other terms that people use. I just chose this 6 here for ease. Physical attraction, sexual orientation is literally about who we would like to have sex with, feel attracted to, right? But this is not the only thing that is encompassed here. We also talk about romantic orientation. And I know it may be a new thing for some of you to see this split in between the two. But let's see, maybe it gets a bit clear as I finish this. A romantic orientation is more around who would I like to form a relationship with, who I feel a connection. I would like to invest time, energy to be with and get to know and form a relationship. For most of us, of course, for many people, actually, they are one and they are the same, right? Romantic orientation and sexual orientation. For others, it's not the same. I know many people who, for example, they are open to have a relationship with a certain gender, but they are open to having sex with people of different genders. So just keep that in mind. Here it's in a mirror of sexual orientation. We have heteroromantic, homoromantic, biromantic, queer, panromantic, and aromantic, and more. I will let you to explore this terminology in the presentation after, just so that we don't go over time. Okay, so this sexual and romantic orientation, they cover the L, G, B, and the Q. Yeah, so now more or less, and the A, sorry. So we have all the LGBTQIA plus more or less defined, and I hope that that is a bit clearer for you, hopefully. But very briefly, I will not go into this too much. I will invite you to, when you think about queer people, about LGBTQIA plus people, not to only look at them just to the perspective of gender and sexuality and sex characteristics. As all of you here in this room, all of us here in the room actually, we are comprised of so many different elements that make us us, and our gender, our sex characteristics, and our sexuality are just 3 of them. We have more to this. We have ethnicity, race, age, religion, and so on, which create very unique circumstances in which we exist, very unique challenges, offer us privileges in certain areas, and make us be oppressed in other areas. So just take this as the spice, if you would like, to the LGBTQIA, and take it into consideration when you think about it. All right. So this is more or less what we talk about when we talk about LGBTQIA+. I would like us to spend a few minutes as well to discuss about what is that we can actually do when we talk about this topic. And my invitation is that this journey is something that you can take individually, first and foremost, because it's about you as well, but also in your organizations, in your groups, and in the projects you are in, perhaps. I added here some ideas for you. And so it's more like an invitation maybe for you to reflect on. First and foremost, I would say that questioning norms is fundamental to being inclusive to LGBTQIA+ people. Besides knowing what does it actually mean and what do we talk about when we talk about it, it's really important to be in a practice, of questioning. And not only focusing on, oh, how can I learn more about LGBTQIA+, but actually, okay, wait a second, why do I actually have to learn something especially about LGBTQIA+? Why is it that I have never learned about this in school, for example? Why is it that my family told me that heterosexuality is the only accepted sexual orientation? Why are we looking at people just as men and women and expect them to fit very well into those boxes? Why is it that we modify people's bodies when, for example, the case of intersex people, when they are born, many times doctors perform surgeries on their bodies to fit them into the sex binary of male and female. And that can cause irreversible damages to people's bodies and lives in general. So why do we do that? What's the purpose of that? And also dream a little bit, what would it mean for each of us in our societies if we would look at each other and our genders, our sexualities, a bit more fluid, a bit more unrestricted, right? And last but not least, when it comes to norms, many times and that's okay, we need to do that in order not to always be questioning everything. Many times we inherit certain beliefs and we perpetuate them, believing that that is our truth. And in reality, if we actually stay with it, we realize that maybe this was something that my parents gave me and I didn't even question it. So stay with that and see what that brings you. also when it comes to one-on-one interaction and personal and individual exploration, a very important thing is that you develop trust in people. I have seen this many, many times with people in the LGBTQIA plus community. Their parents, their friends do not believe them when they tell them, hey, I am actually a trans woman, I'm actually non-binary. People do not trust them. And they believe that they know better what is their reality and their identity. And in fact, maybe another radical idea is that each of us is an expert in our own lives. And maybe that sounds simple, but in reality, I think to actually enact that, to put that into practice, takes a lot of effort in believing and trusting that each person knows what is best for them. Another really important thing is how can we better know ourselves, our own gender and sexuality, so that we can be at more in more comfort with other people's genders and sexualities. Many times these topics bring a lot of discomfort. I'm sure you've heard this. Oh, I saw two men kissing on the street. They were so gross. Or people have a lot of bodily reactions when they see same-sex couples on the street, or especially men. And my invitation is if anything like this ever happens, stay with it and don't shut it away, because that will just make it more difficult to get to understand what does this mean for you and for them. I also want to invite you to talk about this with your friends, family, and colleagues. As much as we can talk about sexuality, gender, and our bodies, our sex characteristics, I think that it's going to become less of a taboo, and people will start feeling that this is just another part of who we are, just like our age, for example, or our education, and so on. Another thing when it comes to personal exploration is not trying to create new boxes out of getting out of a box and creating new boxes. Many times I remember, for example, this methodology, living library, when you go and meet a person that you have not met before, you go and meet somebody. Many times when we meet for the first time a person that is of a certain identity, we're like, oh, okay, now I get it. This is what gay means. Then it means that all gay people are the same. I really encourage you not to do that, and read, learn, and be curious in a way that, oh, this also exists. Oh, this person is like this. Then it means that, oh, that's amazing. Maybe other people are in a different way. Addressing inequality, I think, is essential to this conversation. I haven't really gotten a lot into the various problems that LGBTQI people face in their communities and in their societies, but I am sure that many of you are aware of the discrimination, of segregation sometimes, of violence that people face in societies that you live in. And that is a reality that happens both structurally, but also on a day-to-day basis, one-on-one interaction or group or job or schools. So address it if you can. And I invite you to look at it as if it matters to you, as in, if we look at this part of sexuality in this way, then it means that we look at sexuality in general in that way. So please try to make it as your own as well, because it has an impact on you too. And last but not least, this is complicated. Finding congruence between what we believe in and what our values and what do we actually do into practice can sometimes be difficult. And I know that from my own experience, it's impossible to be 100% congruent. But this is not the point, right? The point is to always be in practice and explore what we can do better and better. All right, so last, I would like to also share a few ideas of what we could do in organizations and in groups that you are in. When it comes to LGBTQIA+, I think that the most common thing is that we don't really talk about it. We maybe don't necessarily explicitly exclude people, but we don't talk about it because it's a sensitive issue. It's something that if we were to address it, then I don't know, maybe not, we wouldn't have so many people coming at our events, or people would believe that we are imposing certain values. And I know it can be difficult depending on where you are coming from. What some of the things here can definitely be done, even though it's not necessarily a public stance. So, for example, questioning the cultures in which you are part of, like the organizational culture or your group culture. Do you speak about this or do you suppress them? Are you able to talk about it, or is it more like, oh, we shouldn't speak about it because we don't really know the terminology, we may say something wrong, or actually there are so many terms that we do not even want to start talking about them? What this does is that it just serves the status quo of making people invisible and making gender and sexuality a taboo, basically, that we do not talk about. It's something shameful, which in turn gives young people who know about this, I assure you, all young people, they know about it. They have the internet, they have Netflix, they know about it. If we don't talk about it, then they believe, oh, this I should not address with the adults or with the youth workers or with my parents or with my family. Another thing is to talk to the actual people from your communities and see what do they actually think about it. How would they like to be included? What is their perspective on what do you do, your activities, your programs, and so on. Make mistakes. I think that, I never thought I would encourage people to make mistakes, but I think that is actually a good advice that I would like you to take. Because if you make mistakes, it means that you were not afraid to speak about it. It means that you took these first steps to talk about it and make people talk about LGBTQIA stuff. However, make mistakes, but correct yourselves. You will hear, especially when it comes to gender identity, many people have a difficult time, as I mentioned before, with pronouns and with everything. It's okay. This is a process. Correct yourself if the person says that they use another pronoun or another word to describe themselves, and then try again and again and again until it feels better. Policies. As I said before, we still maintain the status quo if it's not obvious. Many times, we accept everybody, but we don't really talk about LGBTQIA in our policies. It leaves people at risk of being excluded in our organization. So if you have such policies of anti-discrimination, sexual harassment, or employment policies, include queer people in them, so that I remember when I went to assign to a university once, I saw in the form that they were saying in the contract that they had something around anti-discrimination towards LGBTQI people. And I was like, oh, I felt so good. I felt so seen and so happy to be acknowledged in that form. When it comes to practicalities, there are so many things that you can make, and this is connected to including LGBTQI people in your organization as volunteers, as staff, as whatever you're able to do. There are many, many ways that you could make it a bit more easy for LGBTQI people to attend your events, to go to your exchanges, to participate in your projects. It can be as simple as not having only two options when you ask their gender, so having male, female, and other. So let's say three options can be a good door, open door. Avoiding gendered activities like, okay, boys go there, girls go there. What do non-binary do, right? Or dorms and how people share rooms. You can just ask them which gender you would feel comfortable to share a room with in a youth exchange, for example. You don't have to assume that they necessarily are a certain gender or they want to share a room with a certain gender. And of course, explicitly mentioning, including LGBTQIA in your activities. People are welcome to activities. And last but not least, and here I will close, I invite you to be in a practice of exploring power dynamics and privileges. I know that these words are so heavy to end on a note with, but we exist in a world that is built on various power dynamics. And that looks like heterosexual being more valued than homosexual or gay, transgender being more invisible than cisgender, and so on. This gives us different privileges and different access and ability to influence the world around us. So I know that this can be a difficult conversation, but it can definitely be something that done with kindness and with care, one for each other. In exchange, I would say that it will definitely bring a lot more beauty in conversation, space to share and get to know each other, and also hear different voices and different perspectives on the table. All right. More or less, this was it. So we've talked a bit about LGBTQIA+ and all the different aspects of what it means and how does it look in practice, and also some ideas about what could you do as a person, but also you as an organization. I also added here some of the resources that I used for this presentation and some organizations that can be useful for you. I know that you will receive the presentation after, so please feel free to explore it and see what works for you. And if you have any questions, I am here to answer them. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dani. It was indeed very much step by step and self-explanatory. And even though it seems like these are some simple truths, every time you think, am I doing this? Is it about me?
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely about all of us at one point of our life, but it's important maybe just to at least start acknowledging that we do it and maybe try to change some behaviors, reactions. I would like to ask now Maria to report back from our chat that has been extraordinarily active today. Maria, do we have any questions, comments, anything there?
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Dani, for the amazing presentation and your talk. Actually, the chat has been so active, and all the people are very excited. They are commenting really on the nice flow of your presentation, how useful information you have been sharing with us, and how some people even felt like crying because of the way you present. And the topic is such a sensitive issue at times. And then your presentation can make some of our participants feel very well, and also that they can understand in such an easy and basic degree. But in real life, sometimes it can be harder than that. And what I can comment is that we have two very beautiful comments. Of course, all the comments are very nice, but there are two more extended ones. One comes from Serhan, which I can read now. It is usually hard to open the topic as it is considered as a taboo. Indeed, it's a very big taboo topic. Of course, when a different person is in the room, they attract attention. I like to hear their stance, but I do not want to force them to express themselves. That can be something that maybe Dani, you can comment on.
Mm-hmm.
And another comment that we have is from Ahmad. Very useful to me because we try to work with mixed abilities group, young people, before yet we are in the stage of how to know and to be safety. And now I can, okay, now I see another comment coming in. Serhan is writing an example of what he's trying to say. Example of asking the PACs where they'd like to stay is a very concrete example. It's been a norm to assign the PACs into girls and boys room, and it's not questioned, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, then if you could maybe quickly react to these two questions / comments before we go into more discussion.
Yeah, very briefly, I think this is a good point in terms of how do we actually interact with queer people, LGBTQIA+ people, without forcing them, right, to, oh, tell us that you are gay or tell us that you are trans and so on. I think you very well thought about it in terms of people need their own time. Coming out, for example, which is coming to terms of your own identity and telling others about your identity is a very different process for all of us. And because in most of our societies, it still has stigma, and in others it's even illegal, right, to be gay, for example, or criminalized in certain ways. People do take their time, and they take different times, right, in doing this. I think that as long as you are consistent and continue having expressing your values and being inclusive in your speech and in the way that you conduct activities, I think people at a certain point, when they feel ready, they will, and I've seen this so many times, they just start flourishing because we don't push them. They just do it when they feel ready. And then they start, oh, I am trans, I am queer, I am whatever. And people do it in a way that is better for them because they are ready to do so. For example, I remember I had a doctor, and many of us in the community here in Bucharest, we would go to the same doctor just because she was so sweet and she was LGBTQI friendly. She didn't do much. She just had a flag in her office. It's a rainbow flag, which doesn't necessarily mean LGBTQIA necessarily, but of course it's a symbol that is widely recognized as being of this community. And everybody felt, okay, I can speak about this. When I will be ready, I will tell her that I'm gay, that I'm trans, whatever. So you can do the same in the small things that matter, you know. It doesn't necessarily have to be a huge thing so that people feel included. And indeed, examples like this, like the rooms, the forms, not pushing people to do a certain activity because they are a girl or whatever, keeping it open so that people can choose and have this autonomy and self-determination, I think is essential. I would dare to say with all young people, not with just LGBTQI people. Like if we manage to support people in being autonomous and determine their own decisions, their lives, I think they will flourish in their own time and however they would like to do. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so that comment with the mixed abilities group, I would say that indeed, yeah, when we speak about inclusion, it's important to realize that these things matter to all. We talk about mixed abilities. It's the same with the gender and sexuality. Sometimes we believe that just people with disabilities have access needs, for example. In reality, all of us have access needs. We just maybe are not aware, we don't think about them, or we don't express them. But in reality, you know, oh, I cannot be more than 2 hours in a meeting online. That's an access need, for example. And it's the same with the access needs of LGBTQI people when we speak about gendered spaces, for example, and activities. So,
Thank you very much, Dani, for the input and for answering these quick questions, comments. Also, thank you very much to everybody watching us live today. We will be stopping the live now as we prepare to continue the discussion in small groups. So yes, what we will do very, very soon, Maria will be splitting you into 4 small groups, Zoom rooms, where we would ask you to just think about one more time about what you heard today. Maybe share some personal experiences from your professional or personal background, and come back to us to the main room in 10 minutes time, bringing back one question or one insight that you have as a group, and then we will continue discussing with Dani regarding your questions. Our participants are back. This is really, really good to see you back. Again, just to remind you that we are recording our session, so if you don't feel comfortable having your name up or your video, we totally understand. But if you do, please show yourselves, because this is the moment in our ID Talks that is the most interactive, and we would like to see people behind the screens. And well, let's collect questions and comments from the groups for Dani. Dani, please, the way in which we will address it, I will ask each of the groups to voice their question or comment, and then if you could address them collectively in the end, that would be wonderful. And so group or room number 1, anybody from the room would like to be the spokesperson and bring to our attention your question or comment, please? Anybody, somebody? Room 1. Just unmute yourselves and go ahead.
I would start, and I would take Julie's comment and question, if I remember well. Yeah, it was you. because Julie brought up a very valid question about like dividing the accommodation rooms when you're having a training or a youth exchange. And yes, she was basically like bringing up the question how to deal with that. Do you separate the people by gender or by sex or by whatever? And that was really a nice question to me, where I thought like, yeah, true, because usually we just assume that we're separating the people by sex. And maybe we can find some nice solutions for that challenge.
Thank you very much. Let's hear from group 2. Your question or comment or insight, please. Anyone from the group, just unmute yourselves and take the floor.
Yeah, I will just go forward. We were discussing about different options of representation or chances for allies to gain more insight in life realities. And yeah, we wanted to ask if there are other subtle or not so subtle ways to show allyship or openness for queer and LGBTQI people to be themselves next to the flag in the doctor's office.
Thank you very much, Svenja. And group 2. Third group, please. Your question, your comment.
We were group 3, so probably someone from group 1 should
Yes, somebody from another group, group 1 or group 4.
I was in the group 4.
Please, Sehan.
Well, we talked about actually more commenting on the reality and how things are changing or things are not changing. And actually we underlined the importance of creating the safe space in a meeting or in a counseling or in a youth exchange as the most important thing when we were closing the group, because creating the safe space is not meaning just a place to open up, but like fully opening up, like talking any issue and feeling the comfortableness in that situation. So we have a huge responsibility as the facilitators and trainers to make a real open safe space. But we didn't have actual question from our group. That was our comment actually. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for the comment. It seems you've been listening to what we talked like the last seconds literally of our discussion in the main room, because Dani was just saying about her relations with the notion of safe space. So I am very much intrigued to hear that as well. And we have one more
No,
group.
we didn't listen that.
No, I just quote and unquote, you were listening to us. But thank you very much for bringing this up. And we have one more group that hasn't taken the floor yet. If you have something to add, your question, your comment, we will be very, very happy. Any group missing? If not, then let's move on. And if you still have a question, please place it in the chat. Just maybe to remind that Dani is going to also prepare an article based on the topic and today's talk. So if you put some questions, comments in the chat, we will make sure also to pass it to Dani so they can put it in the article and enrich it. So yes, Dani, you have the floor.
Okay.
Before Dani starts, actually, I made it as a question. So I would like to hear Dani's remarks on creating a gender sensitive or LGBTQI sensitive safe space, tips and tricks, and any recommendations if there are so.
Anna, I would just like to ask the other question, because it's very difficult. People won't face up to the fact that this discussion does not take place enough with young people. and particularly coming from a Catholic background, I really worry about, I did express it in my group that I had a young person who came to me, wanted to speak to me the other day. And it's very difficult in a kind of most religions where it's unacceptable. And I think that's a lot of religions. I'm not just saying, but I think, how do we battle with that? I mean, I don't worry what they think about me, but I think it's just a big question, Dani, to ask. You know, it is. Sorry, Anna, you'll be telling us off before long.
That's okay. Actually, we were wondering also to hear maybe a few ideas and insights from you, Dani, on intersectionality as well, because this is something that is coming up pretty often. Yes, now you do have the floor, really.
Okay, great. So I will start with the first one, with accommodation. I know this always brings up so many conversations, so I'm happy you had some. It's the same with the toilets, for example. Who would have thought that toilets would become a national security topic? But in reality, if you follow the topic, probably you saw that all the conversation around people being allowed or not to be going to go and the toilet that corresponds to their gender. So I think, well, if it is in your power, with toilets is easy. If you have an accommodation and you can convince the people who own the accommodation, please, at least for this week in which we are doing this youth exchange here, change the signs and let's make it gender neutral. That's great. But, you know, this toilet issue is complicated because, you know, there are certain religions, for example, that in which people of this different genders cannot be in the same toilet. So it's complicated and complex. So you, of course, you know your group and you know what would be best to do. But with accommodation, I would say the easiest way to solve this is to ask them when they do the registration or whatever they do after they have been selected. You can ask them first, so what is your gender, like how do you identify or however, and you can give them more options. Ideally, you would just leave a blank space and they would write whatever they feel like, because as I said, there are many terminology that people use. But in case you cannot, you can also put male, female, and other. And a next question could be with what gender would you feel comfortable to share a room with? And then they would say with other, if they are, let's say they are a man, and they would just choose. And then you try to put them together. It takes a bit more effort from your side in seeing, okay, so these people would like to sit with this type of people and so on. And that can be a way to deal with this, I would say. Otherwise, indeed, like if we say we divide them into rooms by sex, we don't really know what their sex is because we can't see that, you know. Gender, maybe we can see it if they are really expressing themselves, but as I said, not everybody is able to really express their gender identity, right? So for example, let's say you would have a trans man who would express masculine, so you wouldn't know that they are a trans man. You would put them in the room with a cisgender man. Basically, they do not have the same biology, but you put them in the same room. Does that matter? I don't know, you know? So I guess it's just up to you to find, and you can explain to people, listen, we want to be as gender aware or gender inclusive as possible. This is why we are asking you this question, not because we just decided to ask it randomly. And I think people will appreciate it. And many people, you will see that they don't really care who they share the room with. I've seen that in many projects. They're like, oh, whatever, I don't care. For others is very important. They really want to be with people of the same sex or gender. But what matters for us is gender, right? Because presentation and how people present, probably people will not know what is in each other's pants unless they, I don't know, they have a romance, I don't know exactly, but that is not the presumptions that we start from, right? Okay. I will go now maybe to the safe space, just because this is connected to this. So this is one way in which you can make the space safer. My radical opinion is that I do not really believe that a safe space exists. And that I say that just because I have been an activist for safe space for so many years, but I don't actually believe that we are able to fully encompass all the diversity that is with us. And because sometimes some of our needs are opposing each other, right? When you think, for example, about accessibility needs, hearing, when it comes to the people who are hard of hearing, with people who, I don't know, need some, I don't know, many different things that we need. So I would say that if you like this term, maybe you can say safer space, because as safe as you can, basically, which can mean small things like this, like the accommodation or the form in which you ask them about their gender, and it's not only man and female, male and female. Some people propose this idea of brave space, which I really started to like. I don't know. It's like, okay, because it just tells me that it prepares people for the real world. You know, the real world is not a safe space for sure. And while I think it's important that in an international project, I know I've been part in so many, and I always came back like, oh my God, I was in love with the world and everything. That is important. And at the same time, the world is a bit cruel sometimes. So we have to find a way in which we bring this together without totally demoralizing people when they go back home and they're like, oh my God, I was not ready for this. I thought that everybody loves me and accepts me for who I am. And in reality, when I go back to Romania, to Turkey, to Albania, I don't know what, they don't do that. So that includes, so for a safer space or a brave space or however you would like to call it, I think that we should both do our best to really take into consideration as many things as we can, of course, like, and so the form I said, the rooms I said, the toilets, maybe the examples that you give when you do a storytelling workshop and say, oh, there was a man and a woman, blah, blah, blah. Maybe there was a man and a man, or maybe there was, who knows what else there was there. So examples that you use in training, or the visuals that you use, all these are little signs that show that, oh, these people, maybe they know about people like me, so I may be open with them. And then, but also to include ways in which people are able to voice their opinions, formulate their thoughts, and be ready to speak with other people when they go into the real world, I would say. This also is important. And this connects me to the allies thing, because I think all these things help in showing that you are an ally, definitely. But probably the most important is the way that you use your voice and your position in society. Many ways you will notice people who have more privilege are listened more than people with less privilege, no matter what we talk about. If it's about race, white people are listened to more, even on matters of race, than Black people or people of color. It's the same here, or in many other topics. Use that position of being listened to, or people, I don't know, maybe being the project manager, director, I don't know what, trainer in an organization. Use that position of privilege to address this topic and do it in a way that shows that you are considerate of, right, the people's lives. And I think people will notice this. Your discourse is very important, and what you do in practice. Yeah. Flags and pins and things like this, they are of course small details that can show people that, but using your privilege is such an important, I would say even weapon, I don't know, like in this, what is happening around us, using that, I think it brings a lot of value. And with the religion and intersectionality. And of course, intersectionality is embedded in all our conversation, but I would say, Terry, to be honest, that I know even here, even in Romania, we have a group called Pro-LGBT Christians, and they are just Christians that talk about LGBT, and they want to promote in a way, how do these things come together? How do Christian values connect with LGBTQIA values? And that exists in all countries. I am sure that there are people who talk about this, no matter if it's Muslim or I don't know what, any other, Buddhist and whatever other I think there is a conversation about this. So I think you can use these tools that religion gives you in order to make an argument for LGBTQIA inclusion. Because I would say this is a tricky situation. I wouldn't say that most religions are against LGBTQI. I think everything is discussable, because if you read the holy texts of whatever religion, I think you can make an argument that actually not necessarily many verses or things from the Bible. I don't know. I know people who have used the Bible as an argument pro-LGBT. So maybe that is something that you can use to make a bit more awareness, and for people to understand that there are people who are both gay and Muslim, lesbian and or Christian and so on, and people exist and they have their lives. Unfortunately, many times this intersection brings them a bit more difficulty than others, just because they have to protect themselves from both communities. Many times, you know, they will find homophobia in, let's say, in their religious community, and let's say Islamophobia in their LGBTQI community. So it's good to acknowledge that and put it out there, just because it's important. And it's, of course, religion is such an important thing in bye-bye, Terry, in the world today and how it is shaped. So yeah, explore it and use it for this too.
Thank you so much, Dani. And there are tons of nice words for you waiting for you in the chat for your today's presentation, and opening our minds and also our hearts to acknowledging where we are not yet there, and how to maybe make another step. So thank you very much for today. Dani, I would like to pass you the floor to make some closing final remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. It was great to be in conversation with you, and I hope you find this useful. Please be in touch if anything, and yeah, take it, use it, reuse it, and hopefully this will open up a lot of conversations with the young people that you work with, and not only. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And before you leave, maybe you just leave a one-word reaction to today's session in the chat. Yes, thank you, Dani. Thank you, everybody, and hope to see you back in 2 weeks when we will be talking about class.